To President Biden's thinking as the 2024 campaign is underway.
So when it comes to age, obviously the new polls that came out this weekend have a whole bunch of numbers that are not great for President Biden. The candidate is too old to be president, too old to be an effective president. 73% say that Biden's too old. Only 42% say that Donald Trump is.
A slew of polls that came out over the weekend didn't look so great for the current president.
Instructive to look at. Under 30. In the New York Times poll, Biden is a 12-point advantage. That's half the size of his advantage in the 2020 exit polls. Female voters tied with Donald Trump. He had a 15-point advantage. Black voters, a 43-point advantage for Biden. That was a 75-point advantage in the 2020 election. And you see a similar story here with non-white, no college voters. So voters of color without a college degree. In the New York Times poll, Biden's advantage is 6 points. He had a 46-point advantage in the exit polls there.
But one of the things that is concerning Democrats, besides the demographics and the overall horse race question, is the number of supporters from 2020 who now say that they don't want to vote for Joe Biden anymore.
Yeah, so take a look at this. In the New York Times poll, they asked voters to recall their 2020 vote, right? So among Trump 2020 voters, 97% say they are a Trump 2024 voter. Really, almost none of them are going to Biden in 2024. But for Biden voters in 2020, 10% of them say that they are Trump 2024 voters. So 10% of people who say they voted for Biden in 2020 are now voting for Trump in this poll. 83% of Biden 2020 voters remain with him today. Obviously, we always look at how people are responding to the economy. Part of this is a very positive memory on the part of a lot of voters of the Trump economy. 65% in the CBS poll say the Trump economy was good. Only 28% say it was bad.
Amid a slew of new polls now showing the current president trailing Trump by various degrees as their expected rematch is getting closer to becoming official.
4 years ago, we here at CNN did 12 polls matching up Biden and Trump throughout the entire 19 and 20 election season. Donald Trump was never numerically ahead of Joe Biden. That's not the case now. So Joe Biden enters with low approval ratings, historically low approval ratings, and he is doing so in a weaker position than no doubt his campaign would want to be at that point.
But Van Jones is with us. The New York Times poll showed this. Nearly 3/4 of voters, Van, 73% say Biden is too old. They say he's too old to be an effective candidate, including actually a majority of Democrats. Just 42% say that of Trump. These latest poll numbers are not necessarily showing a lot of good news for the current president.
No, it's showing a similar story that we've been seeing over the course of the last year. He is losing ground with some key constituencies. Take a look on the screen here. You can see the New York Times poll there on the left compared to the 2020 exit polls. Now, one is a poll and one is voters coming out of the voting booth telling us what they did. But nonetheless, those under 30, Biden has a 12-point advantage in this poll. Well, it was twice that in the 2020 election. Among female voters, Biden is tied with Trump in this New York Times poll this weekend. He had a 15-point advantage. You see with black voters, he's got a 43-point advantage. That's substantial, except in the 2020 election, it was a 75-point advantage. And then if you look at non-white voters without a college degree, you see he's got a 6-point advantage over Trump, but that was a 46-point advantage in 2020.
I'm sure when they read these New York Times Siena poll numbers yesterday in the New York Times, there was a lot of depression over there.
But probably little surprise.
Yeah, a little.
Perhaps gave you pause, as it did many, in understanding at least the current state of the race, according to that poll. It shows Trump beating Biden, and nearly 3/4 of voters in that New York Times poll say Biden is just too old to be an effective president. And that includes 61% of voters who supported Biden last time around, Governor. 80% of independent voters are not confident in Biden's mental capabilities. 56% say the same about Trump. I mean, it is overwhelming in terms of people feeling this way about Biden, much more than they do about Trump.
Right. We had 4 polls come out this weekend. There's a lot of red on this board, folks. New York Times, Siena College, CBS News, YouGov, Fox News, Wall Street Journal. Trump ahead in all of them. 4, 2 within the margin of error, 2 within the margin of error. Here's the key nugget, though. Trump led in 0, count them, 0 polls that were CNN approved during the entire 20 campaign, and there were 4 that were released this weekend. all of which had Trump ahead, even if within the margin of error.
Yeah, and they all basically say the same thing. This is not one of those weeks where you can contest the methodology in one poll because they're all in wide agreement here.
Those delegates come in, which brings in now, where are we? Assuming Trump and Biden continued their path to the nomination. Where are we? This is our CNN poll of polls. Forgive me for turning my back. I just want to bring this up a little larger. 48% for Trump, 46% for Biden. That is no clear leader. If you look at some of the late individual polls that go into this average, Trump has been running a little bit stronger. But if you average them all together, which is the smart thing to do, don't overinvest in any one poll. No clear leader, but Trump has clearly been gaining a little bit of steam as we go forward. Why is he gaining steam? Well, these are the numbers that are troubling for the president. Here's one from the New York Times Siena College poll. Is President Biden too old to be an effective president? Among all voters, 73% say yes, 25% say no. Here's the troubling part. Even in his own party, the president needs big Democratic turnout in the fall. More than half, 56% of Democrats say they think he's too old to be an effective president. 43% say no. So that is one challenge for the president as he runs out the primary season, as he gives that big speech. And again, he is the incumbent president. 24% of Americans say the country's on the right track. Two-thirds say it is not. 65% say the country is on the wrong track as the president prepares to deliver his State of the Union address. One more, incumbents are often judged by their approval rating. You start to get 8 months out from an election, that's a problem. Here's one of the things. You look at politicians, what am I getting here, right? We live in a transactional world, right? So 40% of registered voters said Trump's policies helped them personally. Only 18% say Biden's policies helped them personally. Governor Dean just said he's got the greatest record since Lyndon Johnson. Why the disconnect?
Very simple. Those COVID checks. People remember that I actually got some money directly, and so that becomes a part of people's memory. And also, people forgot a whole bunch of the bad things that happened during the Trump years because COVID was difficult and inflation was difficult. Now that's starting to heal, but people still have that memory of those COVID checks. Look, I think Biden has an important job to do. Not only to talk about his great record, as the governor said, but what he's going to do going forward. The prices are coming down on everything but food and housing. So he's got to show he's willing to fight on the food prices. He's got to fight the grocers, tell them to quit gouging the American people at the cash register. He's got to push on the Fed to get these housing prices down, to get the interest rates down.
This New York Times poll says 73% of all registered voters believe he's too old to be effective.
Yeah, well, look, I accept that he is doing the job competently and well. I mean, I believe that. But the reality is he is not in front of a camera projecting that. And that's how most Americans see their president. In front of the camera, he looks old, he looks slower, he does mangle words at times. And it has fit a meme, and that meme has been sold, as you know, by the Republican Party since he entered the race 4 years ago.
Next for us, the polls, the bad and the ugly. Democrats are struggling to find the good in Joe Biden's numbers as he prepares for that State of the Union address. And if recent polling is any indication of what is to come this November, President Biden may very well be in trouble. Okay, so just how bad was this polling for President Biden?
Really, really, really bad. All right, there were four polls that came out over the weekend, and you'll notice there's a lot of red on this screen, all right? New York Times Siena College poll, which I think got the most press, had Trump up by 4 points among likely voters. But it matched the CBS News YouGov poll that had Trump up by 4 points among registered voters. The good polling for Joe Biden was a Fox News poll that had him down only 2, and a Wall Street Journal poll that had him down only 2. Again, Trump ahead in all 4 of these polls. And here's what I will note, Abby. If you go back to the 2020 campaign, try and find a single CNN-approved poll that had Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden. Guess what? You couldn't find a single one. And in this weekend, there were four polls compared to zero throughout the entire 2020 campaign. So a very different picture.
Because the polling, the same polling that has Joe Biden losing to Donald Trump, here's what it says about Donald Trump's voters. 97% of the people who voted for him in 2020 say they would vote for him again this year.
I think it's because a lot of
But hold on, there's more. 83% who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 say they would vote for him again. The person who is eroding support is actually Joe Biden, according to this.
Yes. I think Trump was tied among women. He had a quarter of African-American voters. These are absolutely, if those splits hold, there's no way for Joe Biden to win because that's a whole bunch of new people coming into the Republican Party. So you could shed some of the folks you were talking about if you're replacing them with this multi-generational, multiracial working class coalition of people that never vote Republican. That would be a new base for Trump that's not showing up in these primaries necessarily, but could show up in November.
Listen, I think it's real Trumpian. A lot of my Democratic and liberal friends spent the weekend slamming the polls and the media for covering them. And that feels very Trumpian to me. Democratic voters, liberals, cannot deny that he is a weak candidate, that Joe Biden has serious problems. They're not just his age. They are issues like immigration, crime, the economy, that voters do not feel he has policy-wise solved, or is even getting that they need to be solved. So I think there's systemic problems inside the Biden campaign, some of which he could overcome, some of which he really can't.
Obviously, Trump and Biden are around the same age. When it comes to age and acuity, the stench is on Biden based on the narratives that have been out there and largely generated in part by Donald Trump. That seed was planted. And of course, Biden has had moments when maybe he has watered that seed a little bit.
But the problem, I think, is the more people see Joe Biden, the more they think that he is showing his age. I mean, he has a gait that is slow. He has always had a manner of speaking that is halting. And so, you know, people are kind of making their decision. And there is this embedded narrative, which has been seeded in the right, that somehow he's sitting there gaga while people are sort of making decisions for him and he isn't in control. And it's constant there. It's being persistently said. And I have to tell you, I don't see it either. I mean, this has been a successful presidency for many people.